Olmert becomes Israel's first ever prime minister to be sentenced to jail time as an Israeli court reveals a verdict of 6 years over corruption charges. A new round of negotiations between Iran and Western powers over Tehran's nuclear program opens in Vienna as Saudi Arabia invites the Iranian foreign minister for an official visit. And a day after the controversial eastern Ukrainian referendum, Russia said it expects pro-Moscow rebels to comply with the OSCE roadmap for resolving the Ukraine crisis.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening. Maybe a hard day for Israeli democracy. One of Israel's highest profile court cases in history ended today with a scathing critique of public corruption, harsh jail sentences, and a former prime minister sent to prison. I-24 News correspondent Eli Ochenberg with the full story.
The biggest corruption and bribery affair in Israeli history is getting to a crucial stage with an historic decision. A former Israeli prime minister will be sent to jail. Ehud Olmert, prime minister from January 2006 to August 2008, was sentenced Tuesday morning to 6 years in jail on 2 counts of bribery. In addition, he was fined with 1 million shekels, about $289,000, for his role in the Holy Land graft scandal. If his sentence is upheld on appeal, Olmert would be imprisoned on September 1st and be the first Israeli premier to serve jail time.
Some of the judge's statements were very harsh. He included Olmert in the same breath as the others, and that was going too far. Olmert insists he did not solicit or receive any bribes, and he sees himself as an innocent man. The next step? The High Court.
Court day opened with harsh statements from Tel Aviv District Court Judge David Rosen.
Those who give bribes are corrupt, but those who receive them inspire disgrace and cause the public to lose faith in the state. A public servant who accepts bribe is equivalent to a traitor.
The judge added that Olmert was an extremely talented man who made a great contribution to the state through his public service, but those words of empathy were less than a spoonful of sugar, and it will probably take a while until the medicine goes down. Olmert was convicted last month of taking a $170,000 bribe in return for his help in approving permits for construction of the Holy Land apartment complex in Jerusalem when he served as mayor of the Israeli capital from 1993 to 2003. Although the decision did not come as a shock, many Israeli officials couldn't help but comment on the events. President Shimon Peres shared his sorrow by saying, quote, "This is a sad day for me personally." Finance Minister Yair Lapid also called it a sad day.
A day in which a former prime minister is sent to jail is a sad day for Israeli democracy, as well as a sad day for me on a personal level.
But it is far from being the last chord. Olmert's legal team already announced it is going to appeal to the Supreme Court of Justice. This national wound will remain open for a longer while.
And joining me right now from outside Ehud Olmert's Tel Aviv residence is I-24 News correspondent Charles Biblezer. Good evening, Charles. So what's the latest right now?
Good evening, Lucy. Yes, I'm here in Tel Aviv outside the former premier's apartment. As you know, he was earlier today convicted, sentenced actually to 6 years in prison. The latest news is that he's in Jerusalem at his Motza house, just on the outskirts of the city. It's understandable that at a time like this, he'd be wanting to surround himself with loved ones. But basically, the love stops there. The general sentiment here is that there's very little sympathy for Olmert, and most people feel as though he really got what he deserved. For the most part, the people of Israel are tired of these types of incidents. Fresh in their minds is the conviction and sentencing of former President Moshe Katsav to 7 years in prison for rape. And it seems as though not a week goes by without another high-ranking Israeli official getting caught up in some kind of scandal. That being said, it's been a very tough day for the people of Israel, but at the same time, they can take solace in the fact that obviously obviously, their democracy remains vibrant, and nobody is above the law, even those who occupy the highest echelons of power.
Yes, definitely. Happy, maybe a sad day, but a happy day for democracy. Thank you very much for this, Charles. Yes, and we're taking a small break from Israel and breaking news out of Turkey. At least one miner was killed and as many as 300 others trapped after a coal mine collapsed in the western Turkish city of Manisa. A regional governor said at least 200 to 300 miners were working in the mine when an electric fault caused an explosion. We'll keep, of course, updating you on this specific story as it develops. And now we're back, maybe to the region in this way or another. Today marks the beginning of a crucial round of talks between Iran and 6 world powers, the aim to iron out a lasting final agreement over Tehran's nuclear program. Negotiators are already underway in Vienna, with EU Chief Catherine Ashton set to hold a dinner meeting with Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif. On the sidelines, observing the diplomatic statements, is the Israeli Prime Minister, who is back to warning the world of making a historic mistake again. I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev takes a look into the Israeli stand.
After a few months of relative calm, the Israeli Prime Minister is back to issuing warnings.
We cannot enable the world's foremost terrorist states to get the capability to make nuclear weapons. That would be a grave danger to the peace of the world.
As negotiations between world powers and Iran on a comprehensive nuclear progress, Israel is watching the decade-long power struggle reach its decisive moment. And Netanyahu is back to reiterating the Israeli position: Iran must not have a nuclear bomb.
It's a historic mistake.
Since the November Geneva interim deal, the dynamics moved to Vienna, and Israel, not sitting at the round table, has been closely monitoring and intensely involved. Now, as a fourth round of talks opens, the parties are beginning to work on a draft of a final deal and are expressing increasing optimism. Israel, watching from the sidelines, is concerned that the sides are just too eager to reach an agreement.
We cannot let the Ayatollahs win.
Jerusalem's main goal is to disable Iran from retaining a quick breakout to nuclear weapons. The name of the game is the scope of Iranian enrichment capability that will remain in Iranian hands. Israel originally demanded a total waiver of enrichment capabilities, but the 6 world powers are only demanding a considerable reduction in that capability. Last week, U.S. National Security Advisor Susan Rice traveled to Israel for high-level talks on the topic, pledging the U.S. commitment to prevent Iran's nuclear capability.
There can be no doubt whatsoever America's commitment to Israel's security is unwavering and ironclad.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel will arrive in Israel later this week and is expected to convey a similar message. The sides are still far apart on key substantive issues, and Israel still has hope that a deal won't be reached. However, it still has time to convince the U.S., as well as other members of the P5+1, to concede to critical issues. Netanyahu will continue to stress the consequences of a bad deal and will either go louder or wait and see.
And with me on set is Iranian politics analyst Meir Javed Anfar. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
So how far are we before Iran will close the deal?
Well, today Ayatollah Khamenei said that the people of Iran will not be brought on their knees as long as they're alive. And on the other hand, we had Rouhani saying that some people are using this isolation and Iran being isolated to basically rob the country blind. I think we're moving in the right direction. Again, it's very difficult to predict, but I don't think the Iranians would have turned up with these talks with the same amount of unreasonable expectations as before. Ayatollah Khamenei's best friend, Ayatollah Vaez Tabassi, from the city of Mashhad, where he's a childhood friend of his, he said in a speech earlier today that I said to Zarif, to the Iranian foreign minister, that I think that all the stars are lining up for us to be where we are. We're not going to force to anybody, and nobody's going to force to us.
The Iranians are going down on their knees, just that the West will accept, okay, we're doing everything that you're doing. You're telling us to do. We are trying to reach to a certain point with you, but the thing that they're not able to convince the West.
Well, you see, unless we know what's happening in the talks, we can't really say. But until now, I think the changes that we've seen, the fact that what was very important about this interim deal was that we know that they're serious, that this is no longer about talk. And, in some things, they went beyond their commitment to the NPT. They don't have to show where the centrifuges are made. They don't have to show where the rotors for the centrifuge, and they're doing it. And I think this has encouraged people to believe that they are serious this time. And I think there are probably things that are happening within the talks that is making the P5+1 turn up. Because if they were completely unreasonable, I think the talks could have collapsed by now.
They didn't manage, of course, to convince Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and I think that Iran will never be able to convince him about the new change, but they maybe were able to convince Saudi Arabia. What is the meaning of the invitation from Saudi Arabia?
Well, you see, I think the Saudis are being very smart. The Saudis know in Iran that there's a huge gulf between the IRGC Revolutionary Guard and the president regarding Saudi Arabia. The IRGC Revolutionary Guard don't want any rapprochement, but the government does. So I think the Saudis are going to invite Zarif. They invited already Rouhani. They want to create division within the regime. The Saudis are actually being very smart, and there are people within the Iranian government who realize that the only way for Iran to be powerful is to contain Saudi Arabia, not to antagonize it like they are doing so, and it's because of the Revolutionary Guard. Whether they will win, Lucy, even despite the invitation, I'm not so sure, because the Revolutionary Guard is much more powerful.
If we had more time, I would like to ask you what would Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will think about this meeting, but unfortunately we don't have more time. Mayor Javed Amfar, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy.
And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is meeting his French counterpart Laurent Fabius in Washington today. The talks are centered on a range of issues, from the failed Israel-Palestinian peace process to the Ukraine crisis and Iranian nuclear negotiations. In a joint statement a short while ago, Fabius spoke on the Syrian war, saying the regime has used chemical weapons, including chlorine, in 14 attacks since late 2013, and also voiced France's regret that the U.S. president failed to carry out strikes on Syria. Personal data protection and the right to privacy have become an extremely sensitive issue since recent revelations of massive surveillance affairs worldwide. Today, it was giant internet company Google under attack when an EU court ordered it to delete personal information from its search engine. I-24 News reporter Roni Ben Massad with this interesting story.
A walk down Google's memory lane may become shorter than usual. According to a surprise ruling by the European Union's top court on Tuesday, the internet giant will now have to grant users a so-called right to be forgotten from its search engine's history. The company, which dominates the internet search industry, has previously argued that it is responsible only for finding information, not producing it. But the court thought it still bears some responsibility for its search results. It all started 5 years ago, when a Spanish citizen complained personal details of his involvement in a 1998 debt recovery operation continued to appear online, long after the legal dispute had been resolved. The European Court of Justice said individuals have the right to be excluded from the search results under certain circumstances, when their personal data becomes outdated or inaccurate. Google, on its end, was disappointed by the ruling and argues it amounts to censorship. The rapid pace of technology change is now causing Europe to adopt stricter privacy policies, and legislation set to ensure them is already under negotiation by lawmakers, targeting more powerful internet companies such as Twitter and Facebook.
And on the same day, further claims of evidence of chemical weapons. We're going back a little bit to Syria, used in Syria's war. Human Rights Watch released a report citing a strong evidence that the regime used chlorine gas on 3 towns in mid-April in violation of the chemical weapons treaty it joined last year. And joining me right now from Washington, D.C. is Mark Hesnai, senior researcher in the Arms Division at Human Rights Watch. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
So we've heard claims of evidence of chemical attacks before. What is new in the new report?
Well, this time we systematically interviewed 10 people in this area of northern Syria that had experienced a helicopter dropping an improvised explosive device from a helicopter and then immediately smelling a strange odor, and then in a matter of instants began to exhibit signs of being exposed to a choking agent. And in this case, that is chlorine gas.
How much more evidence does the world need in order to understand what is happening in Syria?
It is pretty clear to us that the evidence is so strong that the government has used chemicals as a weapon in this case dropping chlorine gas cylinders from helicopters, that it's very hard to dismiss this as a hoax or as a rebel attack, since the rebels are operating helicopters.
Yes, Mr. Hisnai, thank you very much for this talk. And now to Inside Israel. And now joining me, like every night, is I-24 News correspondent Nelly Homer. Good evening, Nelly.
Good evening, Lucy.
And tonight, as the Defense Minister and General Chief of Staff cancel major exercise blaming budget cuts, the blame game between the Finance and the Defense Ministry is on. Before we explore this matter, let's see your report.
The annual fight between Israel's finance and defense ministries has begun as harsh allegations were tossed around on both sides. It all started when Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon and IDF Chief Benny Gantz decided to cancel a major upcoming national preparedness exercise in light of an ongoing budgetary crisis that, according to the ministry statement, the Defense Minister launched a scratching criticism of the Finance Ministry, accusing it of harming Israeli security and nothing less than demonizing career soldiers.
This is a part of a technique to harm security in the IDF and mainly those who serve. There's a serious problem here of a government ministry that does not live up to its words, does not meet written agreements, and does not carry out government decisions and laws.
The defense minister pledged to forge an agreement that will dictate conditions for career army soldiers to replace the current model, which he said is disliked by the military.
When I read an interview with the finance minister Yair Lapid a few months ago, in which he blames all the market's injustice on three groups, the tycoons, the Haredim, and the career soldiers, my hair stood on end.
Responding to the accusations, the finance ministry described Ya'alon's comments as a crude attack on public servants.
The formula is simple. Any addition to the defense budget will come at the expense of the public.
Even in this, there's a blaming game in Israel?
Especially in this, the defense ministry budget is a very sensitive matter that raises almost annually, and we're talking about huge amounts of money, around 60 billion shekels, which are $17.4 billion. And now the defense ministry asked for the budget of 2015 an additional $1.3 billion, and then settled about on $0.8 billion, a lot of money. But the case of the defense ministry raises an important question. The finance ministry is hiding money in reserves while not being accountable for it. So the transparency between the ministries is a highly important issue, and only if they will be completely transparent they can achieve real deals on real numbers. We've asked Israelis today if they think the Israeli defense budget is a bit too much. Let's hear the comments.
I think the defense ministry should get more power and more budget so they'll continue to do their job.
They got enough budget, as they should.
Most of the budget goes to security. There is no need to increase it.
Only the people responsible for defense know the correct answer. It is a professional question, not a lay question.
Thank God, over the last few years, there have been no terror attacks in Israel. I see that Prime Minister Netanyahu is acting to secure us.
You know, I want to hope that the money that the finance ministry is keeping aside is for good reasons and for the people
hoping, Lucy.
Thank you very much, Ellie Armberg, for this. We're going out for a small break, 2 minutes break, and then we will be back for the daily question. Don't go anywhere. Your comments here in the studio. Don't go. 2 minutes. Ehud Olmert becomes Israel's first ever prime minister to be sentenced to jail time as an Israeli court reveals a verdict of 6 years over corruption charges. A new round of negotiations between Iran and Western powers over Tehran's nuclear program opens in Vienna as Saudi Arabia invites Iranian foreign minister for an official visit. And a day after the controversial eastern Ukrainian referendum, Russia said it expects pro-Moscow rebels to comply with the OSCE roadmap for resolving the Ukraine crisis. Welcome back. The World Health Organization reports that alcohol consumption led to 3.3 million deaths worldwide in 2012 only, with 16% of consumers binge drinking. It's one death every 10 seconds, with the risk, of course, higher for men and in low-income communities. Today on The Daily Question, we ask you, should the sale of alcohol be more regulated? And joining me, of course, is I24 News editor Nurit Zanger. Good evening.
Good evening.
And also Dr. Yossi Harael Fish, the chief scientist at the Israeli Anti-Drug Authority. Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, so we don't see you on screen, but we will get back to you in a short while. But let's see first the report.
Let's look globally, first of all, at what I24 News viewers had to say, and it was tending to the conservative side. We had a lot of comments also saying that alcohol is far more dangerous than it's commonly held to be. A full 67% said it should be more strictly regulated. Only 29% said no. And it's interesting to look at the WHO report, because we've been reporting a lot on marijuana legalization, and a lot of those people are saying alcohol is far more dangerous. Why don't you turn to that industry? And now the WHO is doing just that. So let's take a look at the people who say it's dangerous and it should be regulated. Jacques, for example, says, I think it's especially necessary to regulate alcohol consumption among young people who drink more and earlier without realizing the risks. It's incredible that such a dangerous product is also easily accessible in our society. A lot of people spoke about youth. The marketing techniques is something that the WHO recommends scaling back, which obviously, as everything points to youth.
When we see it, especially here in Israel, every single weekend that we are going out, I see some teenagers are just drinking out on the streets, and this is something that definitely we should worry about.
It crosses all borders, every country, this kind of issue. So we heard from every country, and Emily said, Emily Jade, we must do something quickly. Young people drink more, and if nothing is done, the situation will get worse. Maybe we should ban the sale of alcohol to under 21 years. Now, she's speaking from Europe, of course. In the United States, it is banned under 21 years, and there's a lot of arguments on the other side that it's banned, but the banning only makes it worse, meaning it only pushes people to want to go more into it.
So let's see what our guest has to say. Dr. Yossi Harael Fish, good evening again.
Good evening.
So I still don't have him on the plasma. Oh, yes, I do. Dr. Yossi Harael Fish, so should it be more regulated than it already is? And maybe it should be more observed than marijuana?
Well, let me relate first of all to alcohol itself. The story in Israel is that at the early 90s we were one of the lowest rating drinkers in Europe. And what happened with the youth in Israel is during a whole decade, from the beginning of the 90s till 2004, we experienced increase from, let's say, if we take binge drinking, drinking excessive amount of alcohol among teenagers, it went up from 6% in the early 90s to 22% of children who said that at least once a month they binge drink in a party, having 5 or more drinks of alcohol in one sitting, to 22% in 2009, which was very much alarming. And also the alcohol drinking in social circumstances went up also for 11-year-old kids that already reported that at least once a week, 14% of them once a week were already drinking alcohol with their friends. And as a consequence of that increase, the Israeli government decided to embark on a national program to reduce the problem of alcohol. And we started that program with a coalition of partners across all the government agencies and the municipality.
Dr. Harael Fish, do you think that maybe the problem starts with the educational system? Maybe the youth don't understand from a really, let's say, young age that alcohol is dangerous? Maybe we're not doing enough?
look, just allow me to just finish this short story, because from the beginning of 2010 till today, we have this enormous program going on that managed to decrease the amount of excessive drinking of alcohol among teenagers from 22% to 12% in 2 years only. The first 2 years of the program, and it's continuing to decrease. So we were quite successful with that, and that's what the national statistics show here in Israel. So the main problem was to go in and manage to combine very assertive legislation and enforcement vectors, together with education in the education system,
yes,
and in communities and the municipalities. So doing all of that together and putting in an enormous amount of educational programs into the school.
Dr. Hallel Fish, we want to hear more comments from our viewers. Thank you very much for this.
Well, I'll just continue some of what he said in terms of education, which is clearly an important element here. And a lot of people who said no, regulation is not the way, pointed to education. Mari Costa, for example, said the sale of alcohol is regulated enough. It's in education and youth outreach that you need to invest, which seems to work according to what we just heard from our guests. Sandrine Gilbert said the sale of alcohol is already too monitored for my taste. As always, education prevails over regulation. And you have some people saying, like Justine, that it's infringing on the private life, that this is a nanny state if you start really regulating too much. She says to regulate alcohol is getting into the private life of people, and this is contrary to the principles of a democratic republic. So is it our democratic right to drink and so on? Maybe it's not about regulation.
When you are in the proper age.
Exactly. So maybe it's about education, higher taxes on alcohol. But just to end a little cynically, Simon in Haifa says, why just regulate it? Why not ban it outright? I mean, we all remember how successfully that experiment worked out in the U.S. in the 1920s, prohibition. So
yes,
nothing extreme will work.
Yes, definitely. Do you have one?
Of course, always do. So Jeffrey Simon, in an ideal world, yes, it would work, but someone who wants to drink will always find a way. Again, it's back to education as far as our viewers are concerned.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Noreen Tiger, for this. And we're going out for a small break, 2 minutes break, and then we will be back for the rest of our edition. Don't go anywhere. Ehud Olmert becomes Israel's first ever prime minister to be sentenced to jail time as an Israeli court reveals a verdict of 6 years over corruption charges. A new round of negotiations between Iran and Western power over Tehran's nuclear program opens in Vienna as Saudi Arabia invites the Iranian foreign minister for an official visit. And a day after the controversial eastern Ukrainian referendum, Russia said it expects pro-Moscow rebels to comply with the OSCE roadmap for resolving the Ukraine crisis. Welcome back. Just days after intense fighting along the border with Syria, Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Bogi Ya'alon toured the area today. As the chaos spreads closer to the frontier, the IDF is on high alert. I-24 News military correspondent Charles Biblazer reports from the north.
The view from Israel's border into Syria is picturesque. The serene setting masking the carnage that has beset the country during its ongoing civil war. In the distance, the Syrian flag is visible, flying over the town of Quneitra, the site of intense battles last week between regime forces and rebels. The area we are visiting was thus inaccessible, declared a closed military zone by the IDF for fear the violence might spill over. But in a show of strength, Israel's defense minister toured the region on Tuesday.
Here, as is the case along all our borders, the state of Israel defends its interests. We are cautious of all those who wish to hurt us in order to maintain the quiet.
Those stationed along the northern front must indeed remain vigilant. Already this year, numerous soldiers have been injured by IEDs while on patrol. We are told stories of the chaos to the east and the hundreds of wounded Syrians who have received medical treatment in Israel.
We stand here and observe the death and destruction next door, as well as the many injured which we tend to. But this side of the Golan is flourishing. This is the stark contrast between free and democratic Israel and our surroundings.
Also on hand is the head of the Northern Command, aptly named Yair Golan. He briefs Ya'alon, providing him with an overview of the current situation on the ground. While they no doubt hope for the best, for now the fighting in Syria rages on, requiring the IDF to look out for, and thus look over, all Israelis.
And a wave of rush-hour car bombings in mainly Shiite areas of Baghdad left 25 people dead today and left 80 wounded. It's the first major string of attacks in the capital since elections last month. The apparently coordinated blast came as officials tallied votes from April 30th parliamentary polls. Iraq's government has blamed external factors, largely the civil war raging in neighboring Syria, for the escalating unrest this year. And we're going to Ukraine. The crisis in Ukraine continues a day after the eastern cities of Donetsk and Luhansk voted for self-rule. European leaders held talks with their Ukrainian counterparts as rebels in the east appealed to join Russia. The Kremlin said today it expects separatists in Ukraine to comply with the OSCE roadmap. I-24 News reporter Uli Shapiro has more.
A day after the crucial referendum, residents of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions in eastern Ukraine are trying to assimilate to the new reality of the results, still not recognized by the European Union and rejected by Moscow. Hundreds of people celebrated the independence of the People's Republic of Donetsk Sunday night. However, pro-Russian rebels leaders have already pointed to their next goal, to join Russia.
We want to express our rejection of all forms of fascism, nationalism, chauvinism, race discrimination in all forms. As long as these ideas dominate Ukraine, we would not be able to build neighborly relations with our former compatriots living to the west of our borders.
In the meantime, European leaders continue their efforts to de-escalate tensions in the region. German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier held talks Monday with Ukrainian's Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk. The same day, other officials in Europe expressed sharp criticism of the referendum, which they define as illegal.
We will not recognize the annexation of Crimea and Sevastopol. Likewise, we do not recognize the so-called referenda of yesterday.
The votes in the Eurovision Song Contest really were more credible and carried greater weight than in the circumstances of yesterday in Donetsk and in Luhansk.
Another issue that needs to be settled now is the future of gas supplies from Russia to Ukraine. The European Commission said Monday that the sides are trying to schedule a new round of negotiations as Russian state gas company Gazprom threatens to completely cut off the gas supply to Ukraine. As fighting on the ground continues, Kiev hopes it will have enough power to keep the country from falling apart.
And joining me right now through the phone is Dr. Baruch Gurgurevich, expert on Russia and former Soviet Union in the Haifa University. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening.
So we just heard that, let's say, yesterday's actions are not recognized by the West. How come, if this is the people's will, how come the West is not recognizing this?
It doesn't make any difference at this stage if the West recognizes or doesn't recognize.
And what about Russia not recognizing this?
Russia got what they wanted. And now no one can ignore those elections. The separates made it very clear the two regions are not interested at this stage to be part of the Ukraine. It doesn't mean that they will leave the Ukraine immediately. Now it's the time, as I said once before, it's time to have negotiation and serious negotiation, and it will take place after the election. And the situation will depend if the new government of the Ukraine will be ready to have a federation in which the Russian will be satisfied that the Ukraine will not join NATO and will not become part of the West.
So who is basically gaining from this situation? Dr. Gulevich, are you still with me? No, unfortunately, he's not, and we're moving, maybe we'll try to speak with him later on. We're moving to Nigeria. It's been almost 1 month since 276 schoolgirls from the remote northern Nigerian town of Chibok were abducted by Boko Haram militants, and at least 220 of them are still missing. I-24 News reporter Ronui Bembasat takes a look at the recent efforts made to find them.
Friends and family of the kidnapped Nigerian schoolgirls are now starting to identify their loved ones after a video showing them reciting verses from the Quran was released by their abductors on Monday. The story of the girls, taken by Islamist rebel group Boko Haram on April 14th, has caught the world's attention, and international efforts to bring them back are already on their way. The United States sent an intelligence aircraft to scour the area where the girls are believed to be held. The country also shared commercial satellite imagery as part of the rescue effort. The video itself is also considered a valuable piece of information, and both Washington and the Nigerian government said they will analyze it, hoping to find further clues.
Our intelligence experts are combing through every detail of the video for clues that might help in ongoing efforts to secure the release of the girls. It is a story we see every day.
After U.S. First Lady Michelle Obama showed her support of the cause last week, on Tuesday it was France's former First Ladies. Both Carla Bruni Sarkozy and Valérie Trevalier attended a Paris demonstration calling for the girls' speedy release.
We must all, men and women together, fight for these young girls. But beyond that, it is a symbol for all women who are oppressed in the world.
Boko Haram leader Abubakar Shekau offered to release some of the girls in exchange for militants held in prison. But while the Nigerian government weighs its options, the rest of the world and the families seem to be losing patience.
And now to sports. And when you see this big smile on my face, it means that Jonathan Regev is here. Hello, hello.
Hi, hi. Nice to bring all those smiles all over the world. How lucky I am.
Just people need to see you in the newsroom
they
just to understand.
Smile is me.
Yes, I know.
Smile is me.
And because Smile is you brought 2 times Messi and 1 time World Cup today for us.
We don't hear Leo Messi speaking a lot, but he gave today an interview, which is an interview ahead of the World Cup. But Messi's not quite thinking of the World Cup just yet, because he has one very, very big match with Barcelona coming up this Saturday against Atletico Madrid. If Barcelona wins, despite everything they've been through, they will be the champions. Messi endured a lot of criticism during the year, saying that he was in charge. He was in part mostly responsible for Barcelona's weak season.
So much pressure on him.
Yes, but he knows this season can still finish, and in a very, very beautiful way. Let's hear him say.
Let's see it.
It was a difficult year. We had to struggle with difficult situations in the last couple of years. We had to overcome them, and I think that if we will finish it with the Spanish title, it'll be very good for us. I don't know if it's right to call it Save the Season, but it would be a very important title.
And of course, a
lot of hopes.
Yep, a lot of hopes as for Barcelona, and the World Cup is still there in mind. It's only 30 days away.
Course.
Argentina has last won it in 1986. As a devoted Argentina fan, I'm saying it's time, Leo, bring us the cup.
Again.
Bring us the cup, Leo.
Finally.
Can he do it? Can they do it? Leo Messi thinks so.
Let's see.
There is no pressure, but we know that Argentina is always fighting for the championship. We're always favorites, and I think we come in a good moment, and we have the chance of doing something good, and we have the illusion of doing it.
You know what is fascinating for me? Is the way that all athletes look so enthusiastic when they speak about winning.
And they always say the same things. They always, we will do our best, we will try our best,
athletes,
we'll do our best.
Sports players, football players.
I love those who are different, who say different stuff. It doesn't happen a lot, but every once in a while we have them.
And that will be it for today. I know that I promised World Cup, but it will be, still have 30 days, around 30 days.
Oh, we will speak of the World Cup. Don't worry about it. World Cup, I promise.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy.
And for the smile also. Always making me smile. Now to Spain, where citizens who were once encouraged to invest in solar power now feel they were misled after the government unexpectedly cut subsidies for solar panels. Here's more.
Just by these vineyards in southeast Spain lies a field of more than 300 solar panels. 24 residents near the city of Albacete invested in the project in 2007, encouraged by the government to produce renewable energy. David is one of them. Now heavily in debt, he bitterly regrets his decision.
¿Cómo me siento? Engañado totalmente.
How do I feel? Completely fooled. Or we could give it another name, say fooled, swindled, disappointed, disgusted.
Pues, no sé, disgustado.
He's one of many fuming over a drop in state aid to clean energy producers. In the past 6 months, David has received just €3,000 in aid, 6 times less than he pays in maintenance and loan repayments.
No se pensó para hacerse ni para cazar primas.
The idea was not to go chasing after subsidies and to become millionaires or anything like that. It was to have some kind of pension.
Pues una especie de plan de pensiones.
The return on solar energy generation has slumped by 40% over recent years. Spain's government is taking drastic measures to slash a €26 billion electricity deficit after years of paying subsidies to keep prices down. Once favoured by Madrid, renewable energies are now feeling the pain of Spain's economic austerity policies. In all, more than 60,000 people who invested in solar energy have lost out.
It's the government that encouraged us to invest our savings to generate solar energy and then started to apply retroactive cuts by law once the solar panels were already built. They changed the rules halfway through the game.
Manuel left his job to set up his own solar power plant. He says he invested nearly €1.5 million, and he risks losing it all. Even his parents' house has been mortgaged.
I went into the solar business because I really believed what they were saying, and I really believed in renewable energy. I'm really disappointed in Spain. Spain is a banana republic. I've lost any trust I had, and I wouldn't invest another euro in Spain.
Several investors have taken legal action against the state, but there's been no comment from the government. For David, Manuel, and many other like them, the sun seems to have set on their green energy dreams.
And now to economy. And joining me for a look at economy is financial analyst Lionel Friedfield. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
Good to have you again.
Thank you.
So Credit Suisse and BNP are having some troubles with the United States.
Yeah, Credit Suisse is expected to pay $2 billion to the authority, to the federal government in the US, also to the authority that regulates the banks, because they are accused of tax evasion. Basically, you had Swiss bankers coming to the US illegally and having a US citizen as client in Switzerland, opening up as much as 22,000 accounts in Switzerland.
22,000 accounts.
Exactly, for $12 billion.
$12 billion.
Yeah, and it's not new because Credit Suisse already paid a fine to the Security Exchange Commission at the beginning of the year for $200 million. But this time, the Department of Justice wants Credit Suisse to plead guilty, and it is the big news.
So, this is the big news, but of course the blaming game will start. So who's blaming who?
Basically, the regulator in the US is blaming Credit Suisse and as well BNP Paribas. BNP Paribas, it's another story. They did business in Sudan and in Iran, and those countries were under international embargo. So the regulator wants BNP Paribas to pay, but also to plead guilty. Last week, the whole management of BNP Paribas, Jean-Laurent Bonnafé, the CEO, Jean Clermont, the head of compliance, the head of strategic, went also to Washington to negotiate with the US.
So when you are doing business with Sudan and Iran when they have embargo, who is the one who's at risk? Is it the customers or is it the banks?
It's the banks, because they did that through the U.S. Subsidiaries handling payment in U.S. dollars. That's why the U.S. government is involved into this transaction. And they don't want to remove the license of BNP Paribas, but they want to force them to plead guilty. The BNP already provisioned more than $1 billion, but the fine is going to be a few $1 billion. And it has a lot of impact on the economy because BNP is one of the largest banks in the world. And obviously, client will not trust any more bank that cheats.
So what about the clients that will stop trusting the banks?
The clients will have private client, the trust will be broken, expected to be broken. But the problem will be with institutional client, with hedge funds, pension funds. If BNP is found to be guilty or spelling guilty, from compliance point of view, they will not work anymore with BNP Paribas, and BNP Paribas is going to have a harder time.
Definitely a harder time. Well, you have to think twice before you deal with Sudan and Iran, I think, these days.
Exactly.
Yes, Lionel Friedville, thank you very much.
Thank you, Majesty.
And it sounds like something out of science fiction, but at the UN, it's a very serious issue. A 4-day session opened today in Geneva, holding first ever talks on so-called lethal robots. The UN Convention on Conventional Weapons is bringing several governments together to look at the use of autonomous weapons and whether they should be banned. The best known of these, of course, are drones that have become increasingly controversial. And now to culture. And the 67th Cannes Film Festival opens tomorrow in France. Our culture magazine looks at the list of Israeli filmmakers who made it to the festival this year.
US-born Israeli award-winning film director Keren Yedaya is back in Cannes. Known for dealing with taboo subjects in her films, she was the winner of the Camera de Or Award in 2004 for her movie Or, about a unique relationship between a mother and daughter. Living together in Tel Aviv, and a teenager forced to provide maternal protection to her emotional, needy mother who is earning a living as a prostitute. Her following film, Jaffa, touched the difficult theme of Arab-Jewish relations with the story of a romance between a Jewish girl and an Arab man, with all odds against them. Her latest movie, Away from His Absence, deals with the incestuous relationship between a 60-year-old man and his 22-year-old daughter, who live together in a small apartment. The film will be presented in the Uncertain Regard category, and the movie is based on the book of the same name by Israeli author and poet Efrat Yerushalmi. Keren Yedaya is currently married to fellow filmmaker Meni Yaesh, who directed the movie God's Neighbors, which won the SACD Prize at Cannes in 2012. Yedaya and her husband have 2 children, and she's known for her political activism in favor of feminism and women's rights.
And with me to look at more films, or maybe one film, from the Culture Magazine is the host of I24 News Culture Magazine, Oded Gruber. Hello,
Lucy.
Good to have you. So we're going to talk about a new documentary film.
Right.
Well, Boy?
Go-Go Boys.
Go-Go Boy.
Go-Go Boys.
Okay.
Yeah. And you'll be surprised to know, but you know both Go-Go Boys that we're going to talk about.
Both of them?
Look, first of all, we have to say, an immense number of Israeli films at Cannes this year, and the festival will begin tomorrow. It's going to be an exciting one. We've seen the story about Keren Yedaya and her new film. It's going to be... I don't think it's going to be a gut-wrenching story as
Definitely.
we've gotten used to her stories. But Go-Go Boys is going to be fun, and that's what I like about it. It's a documentary. It was selected to screen at Cannes Classics. It's a program within the festival that is devoted to filmmakers, and not just any filmmaker, but really serious filmmakers that have earned their position there. They also show, restored prints of older films, all kinds of things. Let's get to the point. Go-Go Boys by Hila Medalia, a young female director, very good one. It's about Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus, the two let's say, godfathers of Israeli cinema. Yeah, I think that they've earned the title.
Definitely.
Those two cousins from Tiberias, didn't come from much, started the Israeli film industry and did pretty well for themselves, but their big break was in the late 70s when they moved to the States, bought Canon Films, the company, and started producing just an immense amount of films, a lot of what back in the day we used to think of as B movies, action films with Chuck Norris and Charles Bronson, but over
American Ninja?
American Ninja. Yeah, good.
Yeah,
you know, you're a fan. You were
don't
there.
Understand how much of a fan I am.
So you should
American
definitely
Ninja.
check that out because, you know, finally now with them being selected to appear at Cannes, they're kind of, you know, they've earned their place, and they're gonna join Hila Medalia for the screening at Cannes. It's gonna be a great event, I think. You know, over the years, they've earned kind of like their place as serious filmmakers. They have Tarantino is a fan. You know, they became like a cult.
I also have to say that they're pretty controversial as well.
Why do you say that?
In one way or another, you know, not everybody agrees about, let's say, the quality.
Okay, no, yeah, definitely. But they had, you know, hidden qualities. Let's put it that way.
Definitely.
And over the years, they've really gotten some kind of a cult status, and there are followers that keep watching their films, and they also made some quality films. You might be surprised because back in the day they used to rule Cannes. I mean, they had at some point they speak about it in the film that at some point one year they had 47 films at Cannes with 3 in the competition.
Unbelievable.
That's pretty impressive. And they had a lot of ups and downs over the years. They had some quarrels between them. Now they've made up.
And it's ours. It's Israeli. It's an Israeli pride, Gavai Slightly, like you say in Hebrew.
But American Ninja.
But American Ninja. You don't like American Ninja?
What's that?
You didn't like American Ninja?
I loved American Ninja, of course.
Okay, Gerber, we will talk about it outside. Thank you very much for this. We're going out for a 4 minutes break, and then we will be back.